All right. Let's get started. Well, hello everybody. My name is Mike Oriana. I'm an access service assistant here at Poets House, and it is our pleasure to welcome you all to the Poets House New Work Series, our reading series where we highlight emerging and established poets. So for those who are new to the series or unfamiliar with us, Poets House is a comfortable, accessible place for poetry, a library and meeting place located in New York City, which invites poets and the public to step into the living tradition of poetry. Poets House seeks to document the wealth and diversity of modern poetry, stimulate and cultivate a wider audience for the arts. Tonight we are here with three fantastic poets, Joan Glass, Ellen Kombiyil, and Emilie Menzel for an evening that will dive into the intersection of femininity, haunting, and what it means to tell a story of trauma. All right, so up first, we have Kwon Glass. Kwon Glass is a Korean diasporic author, winner of the 2024 Perugia Press Poetry Prize for Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms, and author of Night Swim, winner of the Diode Book Prize, as well as three chapbooks. Her poems have been featured in Poetry Daily, Poetry Northwest, Prairie Schooner, and elsewhere. She lives in coastal Connecticut, where she is a public school educator, and she teaches poetry at writing centers throughout the country. Please help me in warmly welcoming Joan.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for showing up for poetry. I love it when people show up for poetry. I have read to an empty room before, and that's not as much fun. And I've also read to a room that had, 200 people in it, and that was terrible because I got hives and started sobbing during one of my poems. So this is a nice number to read poetry to. I'm going to just start by sharing. Well, I'd like to start by thanking Poets House, and also thanking Ellen and Emilie for putting this together and for the beautiful invitation. Really, really grateful to be here and to be invited. Um, I will be reading some poems from my new book, which is Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms. And this is the Perugia Press Poetry Prize winner from 2024. And I might read a poem or two from, well, let me grab all my books. Hang on. I might read a poem or two from Night Swim, which was my first full-length collection. And it came out in 2022 with Diode Editions. And I have a chapbook here also called If Rust Can Grow on the Moon, which came out also in 2022. That was a busy year. That was all the COVID writing. All of that got published in 2022. And this is out with Milk and Cake Press. So if you're interested in those, you can always check out my website or just go to the publisher. I'm going to start tonight with my newest published poem, actually. And it is called Going Home. And it came out in the latest issue of Passages North, a place that I've admired for probably, I don't know, 12 years. And submitted to once and then never had the courage to submit to again. And I finally did, and I was just really, really thrilled to have this poem published there. And I think it'll give it's definitely a poem of haunting. I feel like everything that I write is about the feminine experience, like however you want to understand that. Um, so yeah, I'm just going to jump right in. This poem is about Michigan, which is where I spent most of my childhood. And it's a poem that the setting for the poem and the timing of the poem takes place prior to any trauma that I experienced. So it's sort of like a surreal going backwards, imagining and reimagining. Here is Going Home. In the kitchen, my father slices a tomato. He sees me and smiles. I pull up a chair next to him. At age 6, there's only one narrative. I've been gone so long. My father tells me to chop the broccoli, but there is no broccoli. Instead of a knife, he hands me a ring of keys. None of the keys unlock the front door, but I keep turning the knob. I try until I forget which side of the door I'm on. In the backyard, my mother sits on a beach towel, grinning strangely and eating pages from her Bible. She accuses me of eating the broccoli. I shake my keys at her. My baby sister is 3. She makes wings out of paper bags and perches on the kitchen counter. She stays like that forever, alive. Someone is wailing nearby. At first, I think it's coming from the neighbor's house, but then I realize my mouth is open and it's my voice. Can anyone hear me? I've been gone so long. Inside the house, wallpaper roses drop their petals like silent, pretty bombs. Um, yeah, thank you for listening to that one. That's the first time I've read that out loud. So that was like a cool feeling, to do that here. Um, right. I think the next one. So let me talk while I'm pulling the next one up about, since this is about femininity, haunting traumas. A lot of my poems, I'm not like a huge fan of content warnings because I forget to do them. So I'm not a fan of them. But a lot of the poems that I write and some that I'll read tonight do reference loss to suicide, do reference addiction and recovery, might reference religious trauma. I grew up Southern Baptist in the Midwest, and it was not pretty. So there's some of that in there. Okay, just so that you're aware. I think I'll follow that with a poem about grief. Um, this poem is called Wildfire, and it is in Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms, and it also was published in Poetry Magazine. And it's about my sister, who my sister died by suicide in 2017, and my entire book, Night Swim, is about my grief journey. So, she and her 11-year-old son died by suicide within 2 months of one another. I was diagnosed soon after that with post-traumatic stress disorder, um, and have been writing about that in some form ever since. So here is Wildfire, and this is after Anne Sexton. Wildfire. For 3 days, yellow haze has enveloped the coast, bathing this city in unease, coating our narrowing throats. Another year has passed without you. Today, your daughter, now 10, asked if you left a note. More questions will come. It is June, and I have never been brave. Wildfires can cast their smoke across borders, but you stay dead. My grief stalls at the edges of every map, a hammer demanding I find new ways to remain a nail. No one can say for sure how long the forests will burn. I am finally less angry. This feels like something else to mourn. What will fill my lungs? Stay inside, they say on the news. Save your breath and imagine coordinates that do not exist. Be an obedient nail. Shut the windows tight. and wait. So I wrote that a couple years ago after the wildfires were just turning the entire world around me. They came all the way up to Connecticut, the smoke, and the sky was orange and brown and yellow, and it was terrible. And that poem came out of that time. The next poem I think that I will read is about addiction and recovery. So, this past January, I celebrated 10 years clean and sober, and I do attend a 12-step fellowship, which is how I did that and how I still do that. Uh, Addiction runs in my family um, heavily. So I'm going to read a poem called Cafe Atlantique, which also appeared in Poetry Magazine. This poem is really about having recovery, having some years in recovery, and wondering if, maybe I could try again, meaning maybe I could, like, mess around with drugs again, and maybe it would be different this time, right? It's a very honest poem about what happens to some addicts and alcoholics in our heads. Here's Cafe Atlantique. A whiskey truck passes by the window. Its logo says, "The crown is yours." The weary woman sitting across from me doesn't look up from her coffee mug. We pretend not to notice each other. It can be too much. One lonely person looking directly into the eyes of another. Last year, around this time, I watched a man walk out of the cafe, and as he stepped onto the crosswalk, a car came so close to hitting him that for a long moment, the driver and the man froze, both unsure who should move first. The longer I stay clean, the more ways the world invents to get high. Sometimes I wonder if I'm missing out, that if, in spite of the undeniable evidence, the rehabs, the annihilation, the lost years, I could somehow safely use. This time it might be different. It's not completely out of the question. It's easy to discount how far I've come when I'm not sure I want what comes next. I've been so creative, building worlds impossible to bear without secrets, become an expert at plotting my escape. I am thinking about this when an approaching commuter train trembles against the rails, startles me back into my body. The woman across from me feels it too. She looks up. Our eyes meet. The train comes closer. Ooh, yeah, it's so weird. Sometimes I feel certain poems like in my body a little bit more. I really felt that one in my body tonight. Um, all right. I'm going to read a couple of poems from Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms. So this book came about because I discovered, well, the book came about because I wrote the poems in it, but I got the idea for the connective tissue for the book, which is the 36 hungry ghosts that are named in Buddhism. So I took some of the hungry ghosts and I created poems based on their names. Okay. I'm going to read one called Fairy Tale. And this is definitely, this is about my sister. It's a poem that I wrote in a series of poems that I don't think I'll ever publish as a book, but they are, they're 25 poems that reimagine things having ended up differently. So here's Fairy Tale. Sometimes we can all use one, I think. Fairy tale. In this version, I do not bury you in the black dress, the one with the tag still on that you hung on the outside of your closet door, a dress you wouldn't have been caught dead in when you were alive. Do you see what I did there? Death is absurd enough as it is. So I guess I'm sorry for making bad jokes, but lately, they're all I've got. You were never one to laugh at my jokes unless they were truly funny. I could count on this about you. I counted on your rage, too. It struck like lightning, and I was the cowering tree. You could always quit smoking without trying, either total control or none at all. I read a poem this week about two women laughing over what to wear to a funeral, as if a funeral is an event like a tea party or a concert. How should we do our hair? What is the right outfit to wear to honor a life? Which shoes? In this version, I bury you in your favorite Halloween costume, the Cheshire Cat one with a grin painted on where your mouth is. I adorn your body with every piece of jewelry you own instead of saving it for your daughter like you ask. Once upon a time, my sister was born. She was loved in all of the ways she longed to be loved. A doctor prescribed the medications that would finally help her, and she didn't ghost him. She never bought the gun, never stored it, loaded in her nightstand. Her child never found it. Julia, in this version, I don't bury you at all. Okay, I'm going to do one more from daughter, and then I'll do one new one that is not published yet. Okay. I'm gonna read my poem called Armistice, which originally appeared in Rattle, and it is the last poem in Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms. There's a song in Korean culture that all kids know this song. It's called Santoki, and it's a song about a rabbit. And if you look at the Korean peninsula, it's kind of shaped like a rabbit. So here is Armistice. As children, we sang a Korean nursery rhyme about a lone rabbit who ascends a mountain. None of us can remember learning this song, but all of us know it by heart. We root for the rabbit, bouncing her way toward the clouds, determined, stopping to sniff the not yet frozen ground for fallen chestnuts. On my pre war map of Korea, the peninsula resembles a hare steadying herself on hind legs, daughter of three gone kingdoms. She gazes warily to the west, front paws vigilant in front of her. I point this out to my students, American 12-year-olds, who are already learning to armistice themselves, determining which wars to surrender, which mountains to conquer. If given the choice between going back in time or into the future, I choose to defy gravity. From here, islands pepper the East Sea, specks unknowable. From here, the DMZ is just the trail of a ghost cloud grazing Earth with her ghost feet in search of something she can almost remember, might still imagine. Pulling down a modern world map over Korea, I asked my students, if you could choose to live anywhere in the world, where would you go? One girl, a recent immigrant from Turkey, chooses an island barely visible. When I ask why, she says, I think there would be less war on an island. I would be safer there. As children, we dreamed the rabbit, fat with survival. Now, we teach our own children that home will appear if they just believe. In the song, we never find out if the hare makes it to the summit. Even so, we sing it, raise our hands, fingers hooked in the shape of ears. We hop, smile, tell our children to climb, show them how to lift chestnuts from the ravaged ground. None of us can remember learning this song, but all of us know it by heart. All right, so we were talking about new shit, writing new shit, and I am working on a new project, which right now the title of the project, I'm like halfway done with it. Right now it's called Love, War, and Other Scams. So it's quite different from my other books. And this is one poem from it. It's not published. It's called Opposites Day. Opposites Day. It's Opposites Day at school on Wednesday, so I'm going dressed as someone who believes in love. Finally, I have a reason to wear pink that doesn't include being ironic. Instead of eating what my daughter calls mom's sad food, I'll eat nothing but heart-shaped chocolates from a heart-shaped box with a sweet and smiling cartoon teddy bear on the front. I'll eat until I'm sick, but I won't retch. Instead, I'll clap my hands together, delighted and besotted, as butterflies fly from my throat. I'll fight the urge to kiss complete strangers on the lips, as somewhere in the distance, I Knew I Loved You by Savage Garden is playing. Somehow, I still know all of the words. I have also inexplicably grown wings, their pearly iridescent plume, the sort worn only by Victoria's Secret angels and my on again, off again boyfriend's ex fiance, the one whose photos I found in a secret folder on his phone. Have you ever seen the movie The Notebook? Noah and Allie end up together in the end, in spite of obstacles. There's this line: if you're a bird, I'm a bird. A moment of poetry, I admit, in a film which turns out not to be romantic at all, unless you fancy the idea of reading the story of your relationship over and over to your wife who doesn't remember who you are, doesn't remember who she is. There's one scene that speaks to me, though. It's the moment when Noah's temporary lover realizes he is only with her to forget his first love, his future wife. It's the way she looks at him for such a long time, understanding as she turns and rises from the bed toward the kitchen sink that he will never love her. How she returns to him then, passes him a drink, her hand steady, the glass full. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Joan. Up next, Ellen Kombiyil is the author of Histories of the Future Perfect and a micro chapbook. Her latest book, Love as Invasive Species, is out now. Recent work has appeared or is forthcoming in New Ohio Review, Nimrod, North American Review, and Plowshares. She has received awards from the Bronx Council of the Arts, the Academy of American Poets, and others. She currently teaches writing at Hunter College. Please help me in warmly welcoming Ellen.
Thank you so much, Joan. That was beautiful. And what a way to start the evening. I love that the three of us are reading together. Emily, it's so great to read with you too. I think this theme of haunting and femininity and trauma, the through line is going to be really interesting in the way that we all sort of come about it. So I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to read several from my new book. This is Love is Invasive Species. I'm really proud of the cover. My friend Meiko Kinkuchi, she is a Brooklyn-based artist. She made the cover for me with all of the like flora and fauna that exists in the poems. And it has two covers because it's a front back book, which means it has two sides, side A and side B, and you read it in like an album. You read it in halfway, and then you flip it over and you read it out the other way. And the reason that I did that is because this book, the central question was, I was looking at the women in my family and I was noticing all of these really startling, like almost the same repeated patterns that would skip generations, but like same things would happen. They weren't good things. And I'm like, what, how are we teaching our daughters these lessons of girlhood and femininity, and how are they getting passed down? So the main question was, how do we learn to love? So I'm just going to dive right in. And then at the end, I'm going to read from some new work that I'm writing. So I'll start like Joan with a poem of haunting. And this one is revisiting my grandmother after she died. There's a lot of, I think I focused mostly on poems about the loss of my grandmother, and then poems of growing up as a girl with my sister and like sort of how we were contending with 1980s culture and being girls in it. So I'll just begin. This one's called Black Fly Summer. I've resurrected grandma with the old incantation, wherein she strides earth again in her thrift store pants and wide cuspid grin. Let the magic show begin. Let a spotlight go fooling fishes. It's a full moon night. If I could conjure it, 3 days for birth, love, death, what would I bother with? Not yet, not yet. Her house gone to ruin. She speaks some. Her mouth's a stone. No, her mouth behind a stone resides therein. Her fingers wiggle some. The quote marks are blackbirds flapping in the near dark. Dark sky, dark bird, what am I imagining? If I want to hear, I must strain to listen. Her story has never been written. The next poem I'm going to read goes back even farther to my great-grandmother, and you'll see the grandmothers down the generations. Love song with contradictions. What were you listening to, great-grandma, down at the lake that Saturday night when you felt you couldn't breathe? Not those lowriders, waxed and raring, but the way souped-up carburetors suck oxygen to drag along the strip, your gulping breaths, gurgling, ineffective. The ambulance fetched you. In the hospital, they lopped off your thick braids to think you never grayed, for convenience or to ease sweating. Grandma brought them home, kept them in a candle box next to her bed. Each night, she'd slide back the lid and touch them. The surprise of it, oh, sorting the clutter after the house sold, Ma found them under the sink next to the Brillo pads. It was unexpected. Not the way, as a girl, when I first touched myself, thought, I'll die from this. More like a child wandering aisles of jarred foods who looks up and can't spot her mother, howls a siren of rage. Love is not a boat moored on a lake that bobs on waves, more like a house, its foundation drilled into bedrock that in an earthquake still shakes. Can you explain this inheritance? Grandma nodded to her bed so she won't sustain a fracture. Oh, to be found but never claimed, picking bright pink cherries, not for glitz, but for sweetness. Pay attention, Ma said. Keep up. The next one is called Vixen Lessons. Even dead Aunt Blanche at the dining table seance predicted I'd get killed by a bus. Only Ma said it wasn't so, her flannel robe flapping open in summer. You're fine, she said, fine as a goose down pillow. I cashed a check for my first stilettos on South Salina at the discount store, traipsing kitchen hip swing and toss back hair, sprayed mint on my tongue, soaked orange peels overnight on the sill. None of them thought I would turn out right. Days of 1985. We who pretended to lie down at parties with lovers on vinyl couches, or wished we didn't but wouldn't admit it, licked salt from necks, bass leaping with our breath, or was it expanding, escaping inside us? The black light's purple stripes transforming eyes, teeth into green glowing beans, separate, alive, our faces into negatives, cried. If we did it, because the Coke bottle chose us when it spun. A boy jammed his tongue into my mouth, which was my first kiss. We didn't ask questions, or we fielded Ouija board guesses. Yes, no, goodbye. I walked into that closet, willingly let them lock it. Oh, our wasted adolescence, assessing vertical stripes on swimsuits as a function of decreased belly fat, obsessed with how thighs pooled when we sat, how absent thigh gap leads to ruin. We dieted on cheese balls, one every 55 minutes, dissolved on the tongue to a well of melted butter. Or we teased our hair to make our faces slimmer. Ruin, from the Latin ruere, to fall, as in headlong or with a crash. We were always falling, laughing, collapsing, unable to stand, our bodies pulsing with famine. Birthday. We ate burgers bloody, buns toasted in grease, and where teeth split the meat, red dribbled down our chins onto the grass. August and the ghost moon shone without the sun having set. Bees pummeled my head so I'd get up and run, sit down again, slather butter on corn, get up, circle and duck, hand slap thigh, slap foot. The buried cat sprouted a raspberry bush. Nothing with thorns, Ma said, but that bush was an exception. My sister sat calm when a bee brushed her cheek. Like a statue, she said, but the world is a breathing place. Tulips dropped petals, and the inner eyes of stalks stained fingertips. That night, we whispered, my sister and I, through grill work, labyrinth of heating ducts that connected us. Ma's love cries echoed through the house. I baked a cake, ransacked the cupboard to cover it in sugared hearts. How sweet it was, feasting like that in the dark. So that was the beginning of my trifecta of sister poems. She appears in the next two as well. Lament with Trash Night and Slugs. Engorged, banana spotted. Is it too much to say this? At night, their bodies glistened, creeping from the lawn, trailing slime toward our foundation. It must have been trash night, or I'd been told, take the clothes off the line before they slicked again with dew. In my defense, I was often barefoot, grass tickling toe spread. In my defense, I could just make out swing set shapes against the night where slugs would gather as for a council, and I too would listen. It was my sister who, from the kitchen, grabbed the shaker, spilled it evenly over the slugs, writhing white. We went down the row, slug after slug, but still they emerged from under the raspberry brambles, staining the sidewalk, unrepentant, exuding themselves without precision up the steps and or suctioned to the vinyl, splotch-ridden siding. Our grandma died curled in a hospital bed near an uncurtained window. We watched her writhe, weak, all night, complaining of singing. Maybe it's crickets mating, I said, but I didn't believe this. Slugs make a loud, rhythmic scraping when they eat. On trash night, we hummed requiems, waiting for the contortions to stop, hosed bodies under bushes. Our grandma scraped at metal railings for anyone who'd listen. Remember who I am, she said. I'm going over to side B, and there'll be 2 from side B. Lament with tulip and crows. Yes, that's it. Down that slope of cut grass, the grave we dug the size of a cat who died with 2 newborns latched to her teats. Premature and bald, they shivered like rats. And then, separately but exact, one kitten grown, nearly pecked to death, crows squawking around him, a fledgling in his mouth like a ripe ear of corn. No, softer than that, of flesh, its black eyes throbbing. I ran from the house, clanging pots. She'd wanted to lift her kittens into her mouth, a wriggling necklace, move them from the basement, musty with pricked bulbs, plant them among bleached sheets. She, burning with fever, trembled and frothed, then stiffened, which is how we found her. My sister lifted her by the tail, and the whole frozen article of her rose up. A tree branch, a kindling stick picked for burning, thrown on the pyre, popping sparks. We wrapped her in flannel and returned her to the earth. The haphazard tulips I'd plant over her, the earth not yet pulsing roots or letting errant strands tear portholes into her shoebox. A cargo ship heaving with loot, our feet shuffling overhead, and she beneath the surface, not breathing. And I'll finish with a short one called Hair. Hair. Beloved, I said, when I awoke, are you afraid of the hair from my body? We were sleeping feet to face, like shoes in a box, semi-curled, facing each other. Yes, you said, but I was unconvinced. The hair is like peaches, I said, if you put it near your mouth. And so those are the selections from Love as Invasive Species. And I wanted to share a couple of new poems that I've been doing. So my next project is the main project, I call it, I'm erasing war. So I'm really interested, Joan, that you're also talking about love and war. I started by erasing the Iliad, which of course is the epic of war in the Western culture. And to me, it's a totally different project, but it's still this through line of inherited thinking. And I think that's why I'm interested in it. Like, how have we inherited this war culture? And it starts with these books and these stories passed down and the acceptance of it. And so I'm trying to examine that. So I began by erasing the Iliad. And so I'm going to read one book. It's short because I erased most of it. And I highlight sort of the female stories. So I have like a mother and a daughter that come forward in the narrative. So this is book 2 of the Iliad. I used the Richmond Lattimore translation because that was the first one that I read, and I still had it from my college days, and I just started doing it. I call this one Chorus as Elegy for the Lost Daughter. And it's also after Nicole Callahan. So I don't know if you've read her book, Jigger Ridge, but she inspired some of my erasures for this one. O supplication, O fresh woven voice of forced supplication. I, as in swarms of bees, low in the stone, hang in springtime. Low of the deep sea beach, I, blazing among them, hasten. And the earth low, sober and clamoring, the horses low, dying in numbers, and the sea, the big waves, was shaken, and the men in tumult love, would in tumult be in love, and I do not even know how it will be accomplished. I am the heart of a mother, the snake coiled around her and her children. This is not a prayer hurled into the dust, teeth gripping the soil. The put away desire is like nations of swarming insects, or like dovecotes, or children bore to a modest maiden who was laid in bed secretly, armored in linen. O multitudinous speech of the goddess, the clamor of the burial mound, of dancing upon it. Lo, the wild heart, lo, the held girl, lo. And where did I put the other poems? Okay, and then I have 2 poems that are not connected to that, that are becoming something else. And I feel like the through line for this is I've started writing more traumatized things, but finding within the poem itself, finding a way to find distance in it. So the first one I'll read is, I imagine my adolescent self going to the mall with Elizabeth Bishop, and she's gonna like help me fix my trauma. So this one's called Elizabeth Bishop Hands Me a Penny. We've ditched my father and his Saturday visitation activity. I have the day and I have her all to myself. Let loose in Shoppingtown Mall, we wade the fountain, bobbing for pennies. Music blares from the pipes, tinny, and our thighs gleam green, eerie in submerged lights. I'm a thief, I say. I'm not a good person. I chuck the wishes, but suspect I've already polluted their magic. Elizabeth Bishop, in her wool suit and beige socks rolled into sturdy loafers, dares me to run up the escalator backwards and not get caught by the mall cop. I will be absolved if I can do it. The miracle of my legs scrambling up the grated maw, the lub-dub of my fatherless heart. Who thought to carpet the mall in speckled brown like a wide trail through the forest or down the steps like a waterfall? All conduits lead back to the fountain where Elizabeth Bishop, its angel, spurts water from her mouth, plashes her bounty on the unclaimed, cast-off pennies. Over time, love softens, she says. Is she talking about her father? How absence becomes the mainspring of desire. All those years of drought, and now she, glorious, orchestrates an abundance of chlorinated water. The twisting knot of my hands undone or cleansed of their doing. The pennies glow green with what I call grief, she calls knowing. And then the last poem I'll read re-examines the birth of my son, which was a traumatic birth, and I've written about it for more than 20 years. But this is the first time I approached it from a totally different place that allowed me to get it down where it didn't feel traumatic, even though it probably is maybe to someone else, but it allowed me to see it and get control over it. So I wanted to share that poem here. It's called Flat. I was pregnant. She broke my water. There are videos from India of women squatting. My hair was long, flat on my back on the bleach sheets. With her fingers, she pried open the lip of my cervix. Lie back, she said. Let me check you. I complied like a puzzle laid flat distorts the world. I did not want to pick stray pieces of myself off the floor. We walked near the mat to speed up contractions. A woman stopped us. Take her to the hospital, she said. I assumed I knew what natural meant. The women squat in bliss. The lip of my cervix was a flattened picture of the world. I said to the picture, do not lie, even though it was I who was misshapen. I was lying on the sheets. No, she lied. She laid me down to test if it was time. I wanted the baby. My husband lost some hair from stress. I did not care about cultural expectations. I told myself nothing bad could ever happen in India. India was idealized like my husband. The culture clash is most felt when walking at the Met. I just saved you a few hours, the midwife said. I left the hospital still fat. I drank only broth. The baby fluttered and kicked. The hospital was a safe space. I don't know why. I thought this. Before you were born, I saw you. I took it as a sign, like a lake with three suns. Could I have saved myself? I wanted to squat, but was made to lie flat. It was a test of my resolve. The edges of a puzzle contain the shape of what is to come. In the videos, some women come when they crown. There is always blood, like first sex. The midwife cut me and stitched me up. I was not unharmed. She wrapped you in cotton and bequeathed you to us. The videos rewound in my head. I am not sure which test this was. Thank you all so much, and thank you, Poets House, for hosting us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ellen. Uh, Last but not least, we have our final speaker of tonight's new works reading. Emilie Menzel is the author of The Girl Who Became a Rabbit, published with Hub City Press, winner of the New Southern Voices Poetry Prize. Her work has been featured in such journals as the Bennington Review, Coppernickel, and The Offering, among others. She holds an MFA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and serves as an editor and librarian for the Seventh Wave community. Emilie is currently based in Durham, North Carolina. Please welcome Emilie.
Thank you all so much for making time for poetry on what, at least in North Carolina, is a really beautiful Tuesday evening outside. But I think evenings are good for poetry inside and outside. I'm going to read from my new book, The Girl Who Became a Rabbit. It is a book-length poem, which is to say, it's a book-length prose poem, which is to say that it has the attention to line and lyricism of poetry, but also an interest in narrative and in story, and in particularly story that is about large emotions. So I'm really pleased with how all these readings have just come together. Like with grief, with anger, with frustration, feelings that are large and messy and kind of spill out of their container. And so the book's considering the transfiguration of a young woman who in Apollo and Daphne, the transfiguration happens and the woman's kind of stuck, and it's sort of an unfortunate situation. This is transfiguration as opportunity, as growth, as something beautiful to build into something new. So I'm going to read from the very beginning of the book, just the first section here. To speak the haunting, let the body be seen through the trees, and the trees through the body, and the body not be seen at all. Tree branch grief, wind bristle grief, giddy with sun, reminded of ghost. It was collaring, I could not cage it. It was lowing, I could not speak it. What is to speak, and to speak of it forming, the moving it forward, the living as child, the skin still redreaming. The sheep through the trees seen rough, but not fully, seen bright, but not fully, seen clean, seen alone. I have been complicit in slant panes of light. He tips me with light that fills me with dust, calls air a containment to gather our arches. To speak whole the room, let the room speak of you. We stand the room hips, my small breasting hips. Practice our angling to keep the room centered. Tip me with light, to till me with light, to yearn me be animal. I yearn to be animal. At least when you're animal, you know you are loved. We are all of our versions, the sick and the languid, juxtapositions of the mundane, the pain of budding shoulders, blooming like antlers from our backs, thin scoops of bone growing us into a creature when a creature is safest, is distanced enough to be a fabled enactment of me. I start my swan creature unfolding, the arms loosening, arcing, the cicadas now suckling, the borrowed skin climbing, moving away from the embrace of the head. The it of the body was decided by an us. How much do we lose in losing one another? How much of the world played out in my head and when I wasn't looking? And is that what we call complicity? I built a body like I built a home to keep the other out. If I wrap my sheets around me in hiding, do I grow white wings? Can I loop my crane neck under my wing, wrap neatly like a hose she dribbles water? Sometimes she is a leaky sea that must be drained, unplugged, and emptied. This is not a body in pain. This is a body more victorious. The story of a selkie slipping in and out of her skins. Silhouette remolded, dance as an assembly of human geographies. Sometimes it happens that our bodies receive us in confusion, that the whittler who carves us pulls the knife when he shouldn't, that we end up stringed like unkind violins. And a body shouldn't have to stay as a body does not want to be. Navigate new skin, find thread against bone. Let the imagined body be more important than the real. It is a funny thing to realize we have been carrying a creature in our pockets, unknown for years. Look at our hands. Look at our fingers. Consider how we curl our body, how we curl every day. We curl our own body into a shell. The snail is our curled fist, or our curled fist is a snail, and in our curling we realize we and our creature need one another, that the imagined requires resources of the real, and the real requires materialization of the imagined. In mornings, I must acknowledge my shadow or spend the day in darkness. My shadow and I rise together. My shadow rolls a tantrum on the floor, and I step over her to retrieve my coffee. When I dress, I slip her on like silk stockings, but we both know she's no luxury. She winds her way up my legs. We pass the day dragging one another through dirt and our skin the sites of many small dramas. Returning home, we've at least accrued experience. I untangle her from my torso so she can wander the house while I sleep. Let her shadow color fully formed spend the night bleeding out into the corners of rooms. Early morning, let her return to bed, exhausted, curl into us under the covers of our home. I am trying to rebuild a soft home and soft light, the way a family fills with light, breathing, and can easily, after dinner, hold together in quiet. To be safely lonely is a feeling I'm closer to than to be safely together. I curl and I am trying to be bigger, but my body is a body. I must grieve for emotions, and a body in grieving is sloppy and turning and does not sleep without flaring. And I want to know that you, too, are feeling not as punishment, but as recognition that we were once tethered. We are a body relearning how to navigate the world as only one body. We will fable the body to give it beginnings. Our mother built us a spine. We rolled octagons into our hands while wheeling piano scales. We discovered our arms while climbing trees. It's doing things hands do. It's doing things cross-faced. It's living a world where pockets are mammals and milk is a cheapening, and we all are a whole collection of other. Unrobe our shape behavior to skin our cheeks, unfurl a leaky sea to leaky light. I open a window and let. So scattered throughout the book are these little more, I would say the whole book is kind of a fable of the body, but there's these more kind of explicitly fable-like little interludes with a character named Ellis. And Ellis is a little like if you've seen those murder mystery shows where the woman has the binoculars and she's watching the neighbors through the window and she has it all down on tap. That is Ellis, except maybe several decades too early in her life. I'm going to read a few Ellis poems. There's a window directly across the alley from Ellis's window, and in that window there must also be a room in which a person lives. And in that room in which a person lives, that person must also be Ellis. Her lamp, too, glows yellow. Her chair, too, is red. She is yet to see a stranger at this window. She is yet to see a creature at the glass. There is an object on the interior windowsill of this room, inside the room across the alley from her, and it could be her typewriter. There's no evidence to conclude it is not. There's a fine little blizzard at work outside their window, and the sun is setting quickly outside their window. The cat is meandering for food on her side of their window, and the town hums forward as usual below. And it is possible that the room is a room with her, but a her that was herself 2 hours ago, the time in which she was in the other room napping, or downstairs cooking, or a space in which she would not frequently pass by. Ellis is coveting their window. She is aspiring to visit. She is planning that next Tuesday she will be at the window across the alley from hers when Ellis is also at mine. Read Ellis not part 2, but part later. Ellis has been coveting a stone in her neighbor's front yard for some months now. But here at the dawn of October, the ice cream truck is still singing rounds outside her bedroom window, the sparrows still feeding and the stone still untouched. Tomorrow will make 3 months since she began her coveting. We're unlikely to find a better one, advises her brother, and he is right. Such specimens are rare. Each evening, Ellis and her shadow walk along the gutter of Eckards Lane to the warm asphalt cul-de-sac to observe the stone in neighborhood evening. It is a gray stone amongst an arrangement of mostly white stones, bold nose, bold shoulder, thin scar skirting its back. It is easy to spot from the end of the neighbor's driveway. And each evening in the fluorescence, the fluorescence sits kindly in the trees. Each night the fluorescence sits kindly, and Ellis checks on the thin scar stone. It must be quite lonely, pressures her brother. You should capture it soon, pressures her brother. But Ellis has been trained as an observer, not as an enactor. How to perform a list of tools and nets required for extraction. She is exceptionally cautious about approaching the stone with an incorrect arrangement of skin. Should she approach incorrectly, the stone might grow startled and turn in character. A stone may sleep steady at the edge of the azaleas, but approached by rough boots or scrape of a trowel, the mode of acquisition is essential. The last weekend of October, Sunday morning, sunning day, Ellis ties her boots to her feet, selects a silver fishing net from the garage, and walks the gutter of Eckart's Lane to the cul-de-sac. To sleep the lawn gently, and she steps onto the lawn. And the old wolf saw his reflection in the local swimming pool, a small path through the woods to reach the water, and the trees stood kindly in their fluorescence, and their fluorescence sat kindly in the trees. And I will read one more here, one last section from the book. I'm realizing it's a very appropriate Tuesday callback, both to earlier poems and within day of the week. It happened on a Tuesday. It happened on a Tuesday. I entered the room, and the room kept giving. I entered the world, and the world kept giving. I entered the room, and something looked back, looked behind, looked back. I want for you a more carved language. I want for you a carving language, and the word, it was never a single object. It was never a single form. Do it large, do it wrought, do it as a house dented by emotion. The space of a room is a performance, and it's better not to be in a hurry. You get harried and besotted. Open the door, step inside, gaze to the ceiling, gaze to the floor, assess the room's breadth, assess the room's ease, assess the room's containers and containments. Strive for a more intimate relationship with objects. Desire a great sincerity of connection. This is not a vase, this is your mother's vase. This is not a chair, this is your father's chair. You must act the room. Spread yourself widely, wave your arms, wake up the air. A house can be physically wrecked by chaotic thought. Don't let the birds swoop in. Retrain your compulsions, or the siding will crumble. You must hope for a simple catastrophe, all the china smashed in a single go. My towers stabbed and splayed, do it right, do it rot. What does it mean to be a location? If the act of viewing itself gains enough density, it becomes a location. Do it rot, do it right, and the lyric alone will be a room still giving. Should the collectivity of birds enter la maison, the maison will become an act of viewing, all eyes on the creatures, the creaturely, all eyes in attendance. Should the collectivity of birds enter la maison, the maison will billow, turn, and dent with emotion. Shrieks will emit from the creatures viewing the creatures. Shrieks will emit from this holy act of viewing. I don't know how to relate to objects without consumption, and the birds don't either. Do you have a better plan than this pecking? Shriek louder. Shriek for more indentation. Shriek for the wallpaper to finally peel. It happened on a Tuesday. It happened on a Tuesday, and I awoke panting. It happened on a Tuesday, and the children were still born. It happened on a Tuesday, and my neck took to aching. It happened on a Tuesday, and my toes kept to pointing. I looked up, and the room descended. Sleep fell like a dusting, a tossed-up tent of fabric that bellowed back down. Inside, with the heat and the dim, the man's round face reminded me of an umbrella I once had owned. Thank you so much.
Wow. Uh, what a poem to end off our series with, especially referencing the day of week. Well, yes, please, guys, let's try to give it up for our poems. I know this is all virtual. It's a little hard to hear claps, but thank you so much for everyone joining us online, from the wider world web. We hope to see you all again, hopefully in person at Poet's House. I'm gonna go ahead and also drop the links to everyone's book. Please feel free to visit their websites and support them. Please. And yes, we all hope to see you all soon. Would say get home safely, but I hope you already are home safely. Thank you so much, folks.